China has one very big problem on its hands. In fact, it's the biggest in the world. I'm talking about its population. It seems as though they are encountering what Japan, Europe, and much of the West also is: an aging population. While China has years to go before they are in the same situation as their counterparts, their task is way more intense simply due to the vast amount of people that we are dealing with. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we are going to look at the situation in China. I want to cover the destroyed financial system of Japan as well as US stock buybacks. Let's begin. China's childbearing population versus the year-over-year change. So you could see that these are both on the decline when you look at these numbers, taking it from the current, continuing on the trajectory. You will see that as the years go on, the childbearing population will decline. This is a mirror of what's happening in Japan, what's happening in Europe. It's going to take a while to get to that level, obviously. However, it's going in that direction. Now, very clear, they implemented a one-child policy, and while they have backtracked on that, it still isn't changing the trajectory, still not changing the course that's going on here in China. So it's interesting to see. This next one, very quickly, China births, average births per 5 years. You can see the estimates on the right-hand side there. It doesn't matter how you look at this. Ultimately, the trajectory here is down, and that's not really a good thing because you want to have consistent growth in your population. You want to have more people, and this is from the government's view, you want to have more people that are going to pay taxes, more people working, more buildings being built, more houses being built, more businesses, more everything that's going on, basically more velocity, more things happening, or else you have stagnation, you have deflation. Take a look at what's happening in Japan, take a look at what's happening in Europe, and even to a lesser degree, what's happening in the West. China's working age population, this is also declining, and that is not a good sign. This is the current level here. Looking at this, decline year after year after year, peaking out at around 2010. This is going down. The 16 to 60-year-old year-over-year change, of course, also declining. Now, there's a large group of people that are continuously coming up more and more, and that is the elderly. Looking at this, China's working age population declining, but the 60-year plus old are increasing. So the elderly people generally require more of the healthcare, more of the safety nets or social assistance programs. Now, things may work a little different in China than they do in, let's say, the US, but let's take the example of what's happening in Europe. Right now in Europe, there are many people who are in this range of 60 years plus. They are fighting for their pensions, and pensions are ultimately putting a heavy burden on the government. The government has promised to pay back, and although that is now being put into question, we are looking at a time in which individuals here are being further burdened by the systems that have been set up. They are not designed to have less people paying into a system and have more people taking out of that system. That's why all of these safety nets are really a fraud, because they're just a Ponzi scheme that have been set up by these different governments, by the financial institutions, and ultimately they only have two options, and they can take money directly from taxpayers or they can print money, and they may do both. They've done that before, obviously. However, you look at this over a long period of time, it's not a good sign. It happens to be China in this case, but ultimately we're looking at that in other countries as well. How can you ever manage to resolve a demographic crisis such as this? China is one that will ultimately have an effect a little later down the road. But Japan right now, it's a problem today, as well as looking at the areas of Europe, terrible. But even when you look at Canada, US as an example, there's not enough births per household, and that's going to be a problem in the future. You need to have 2.1, they say, of a replacement rate, as they call it. Now, the 0 to 65-year-old population minus Africa and India, you need to do this to subtract those two because they are growing. But everywhere else, it seems to be declining. Literally just taking away the continent of Africa as well as India, and you will see that they are declining. India is supposedly going to surpass China in its population. We'll see how it goes. They are approximately, last time I checked anyway, every day it grows, but around that 1.3 billion, give or take. Give or take a few hundred million. But look at the 0 to 65 year-over-year change. As time goes on, this is going to become into the range where, you know, it's negative. And this is an interesting dilemma that they're going to have to deal with. I mean, ultimately, if they have the safety nets that are there, social assistance programs, they're going to need to expand them, putting a further burden. How are they going to do this? Well, they need to increase the growth. And how can they increase growth? They need to increase stimulus. And it's the same problems that are happening in the West. They're not going to get away with it. China, under 65-year-old annual population change in the millions versus debt and the GDP. I couldn't believe this. Just look at this. Here's the GDP, okay? 12 trillion. Look at the debt. It's showing 40 trillion, but actually the accurate statement is 38 trillion, based on what I understand here. But anyway, looking at $38 trillion of debt compared to 12 trillion of their GDP, and we are not looking into real statistics. Of course, this is their fraudulent statistics that they put onto the mainstream media. Either way, we're looking at a complete disaster on our hands. There's no way that they are able to have a time in which they have a demographic crisis, ultimately not enough money coming into the system, and they need to replace that with central banking. It's obviously going to be a problem. There's no doubt about that. Now, this right here should be front page news. It's not, but you'll get it here at the Money GPS. Not a single Japanese 10-year bond traded on Tuesday. Not a single one. Some jobs might be threatened by automation, but when it comes to government bond trading in Japan, the biggest threat might be the country's central bank. The Bank of Japan has vacuumed up so much of the government bond market, in excess of 40%, that it's left fewer securities for others to buy and sell. Some other buyers, such as pension funds and life insurers, also tend to follow buy and hold strategies. All right? Not a single benchmark 10-year note was traded on exchange. How can that happen? They literally bought it all. Imagine that. They bought the whole market. Nothing was traded. And I constantly have to talk to people and have them try and explain why Japan is the model for success of money printing, of Keynesian economics. This is kamikaze economics as far as I'm considered. Switching gears. U.S. equity outflows and implicit outflows from derivatives net selling drove sell-off. Look at this. $73 billion of outflows from U.S. equities over a 3-week period right now. It hasn't been this low, and this chart goes back to 2004, and we haven't even seen this level of outflows. Now, how did the market stay in a relatively same range as it was before? Corporates have likely been the primary buyer, offsetting fund/futures selling. Approximately $250 billion in buyback announcements over the last 3 months. Have no fear, if the central bank isn't there, stock buybacks will be announced. And by the way, I'm covering this chart specifically because some individual was asking me, please cover stock buybacks. I said I will cover them. I've shown you this chart before, but essentially what we're looking at here is the announced versus realized buybacks. They are announcing $842 billion worth here in 2018. Whether or not they will do that, I don't know. But as you can see, over these past few years, somewhat, I would say to some degree, they've been fairly accurate. There hasn't been any big differences. So I would say around that $800 billion mark, no big deal, not an issue. All we have here is just normal stock market fluctuations and normal events that occurred. Oh, no worries. All right, now this is from The Economist, external sovereign defaults since 1800. Now, for those people who believe that there are no bankruptcies, that there are no defaults, I would say you have not read history and you are ignoring the facts. Let me reiterate, if you do not understand that countries go bankrupt, that currencies lose all their value, then you do not understand history, and you need to proceed to open up an actual textbook and read from it. Learn history. If you want to know about health, learn the anatomy. Don't look at what other people say. Learn the anatomy to learn health. Learn history to understand what happens in the economy. And then, of course, you track the progress as it goes on every day. All right. Look at this. Now, this isn't even a fact here showing you up-to-date information. This is only as of 2014. Venezuela, as far as I'm considered, has already defaulted. They've defaulted on much of their debt. Look how many times these countries, and they're repeat offenders in some cases, like, for example, all of a sudden Nigeria had several instances of default. People still give them money, or investors anyway. Look around. I mean, you have areas of South America, Greece, of course, regularly just defaults, clean a little house there. Mexico defaults several times. Argentina, many times, in fact. You know, Portugal has happened before, but of course we're looking back into the 1800s. So does that have any relevance to today? And the answer is yes. Despite what a certain individual had an argument with, who is a quote-unquote wealth manager, said that what happened 100 years ago was not a determining factor of what occurs today. He should, unfortunately, I'm not going to say it. That's all. I just wanted to show you this, that it is a fact. Okay, some people deny it. Take a look for yourself. Just have to look in history, that's all. If you found the video informative, please give me a thumbs up. When you give me a thumbs up, it helps to support the channel. And don't forget to subscribe. There are now approximately 95,000 people here on this channel. It is growing, and I want you to be a part of that. So all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, and you will be notified of all the videos that come up here. I post every single day, always covering new types of information. So check it out, hit that subscribe button. And if you found the video informative, I know that you will find my books, The Money GPS, and my newer release, Global Economic Collapse, even more informative. You can actually flip through these books. If you go over to Amazon, there's a look inside feature. It's going to allow you to flip through the pages of these books to see if you like them. Take care.